In rowing in particular, it's a repetitive sport. You get really good at one motion, which is the rowing stroke, right? But you go climb the real estate mountain, and there's so many avenues in real estate. Like your listeners know, you can invest, you can be an agent, you can flip, you can, wholesale, you can be on title or lending. And like, there's all these things around it. And there's all these different ways to be successful in that space.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Hans Struzyna. Hans is a top Bay Area real estate agent and high-performing Bay Area professional. He's an Olympic rower and a podcaster for driven people who want more from life. His days consist of hustling for his clients in Alameda, Oakland, and Piedmont, having compelling conversations with thought leaders on his podcast, and tearing it up with his Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy on the East Bay trails. Hans is just a very unique individual. I love this conversation. It's just incredible to meet somebody like this that, is so driven, right? He's an Olympic athlete, and that doesn't happen by accident, folks. I love the drive behind athletes and how that connects to just the entrepreneurial drive as well, and how it can be so similar, right? I was never an Olympic athlete by no means, but I would like to think as an entrepreneur, it's kind of a similar mindset, right? You cannot give up when things are difficult. And that's why most people do not become an entrepreneur, right? Or they don't have high levels of success because things get difficult and they give up. Well, when you're an Olympic athlete, that is just not an option. And Hans goes through that today. He's going to talk some about mindset, but he's going to get in, just achieving excellence as an elite athlete, right? The perseverance through failure. And he's going to talk about some failure that I think is going to be encouraging to you as well. And things like this just don't happen by accident. And so, but rowing is a team sport, and he's going to get into some lessons learned through that. That's going to help you, but how this also connects to business. But then it's going to take a unique turn during the conversation because he works with lots of high net worth individuals and who we would call investors, right, in our business. But for him, he's trying to sell them a home or sell their home for them one way or the other. And so it's just interesting, the dynamic that's some of the same, right, in our businesses. And we're going to get into that. But another neat turn that the conversation takes that was very important to Hans is about his marriage and the importance of building that strong marriage, and especially in business. And our business can sure take away from a marriage, and from many entrepreneurs, unfortunately. And it's just, to me, it's not worth it. I don't care how successful a business can be; it can never be worth your marriage. And I love the focus that Hans puts on that, and even bringing it up during the conversation, or even in some of his suggested questions. So I enjoy meeting Hans. I know you are going to enjoy meeting him as well.
We are back at GoBundance, and I am thankful to be in person with my guests today. And this one specifically has an amazing background. It's not every day I get to interview an Olympic athlete and who's now become an entrepreneur and very successful. Hans, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, honored to meet you. And it's one of the great things about GoBundance, right? There's many people here who are high achievers. They are go-getters, but in very different industries, right? And many things we can learn from each other. And so it's just it's an amazing atmosphere. And I hope listeners, I hope you'll consider GoBundance. They've just provided an amazing event. But Hans, I want to learn a little more about you. I want the guests to learn a little more about you and your background, because I think that it says a lot about, your success too as an entrepreneur, right? And we're going to connect those things because not everyone can say they've done what it takes to become an Olympic athlete. And that's not something that happens overnight, right? And becoming a successful entrepreneur doesn't happen overnight either, right? And so I think there's tons of similarities there, that happen to make those things happen. Neither of those are easy, right? So So I want to tell us a little more about your backstory and being the athlete, becoming the athlete that you became, and then we'll move forward.
My story begins in Seattle, Washington. Was born to very wonderful, loving parents who gave me a lot of opportunities. One of the most impactful ones being to try the sport of rowing. Most people think it's a pretty fringe sport. How the heck do you even get into rowing? That's a pretty typical question. But in the Seattle region, for anyone who's from the Pacific Northwest, you see it. It's visible. You've got 2 bridges that go over Lake Washington. You see a lot of crews out there. It's in the consciousness of the community. We as a family started that doing private lessons just as a summer thing for fun to do. And I found that I was good at it and I was interested in it. So then I got encouraged to join the rec team and then join the fall team and all that. Simply put, that led me to a 12 and a half year career that ended up getting me all the way to the Olympic Games. For context, I played football, basketball, wasn't much of a baseball or soccer guy, track and field. I did a bunch of the typical stuff, but I grew really late. And so I think I was 4th grade. I was one of the best kids on the field in football and one of the bigger kids. 5th grade showed up for tryouts. I was the smallest kid. It just shot up like that. That was a big part of my story, especially as an adolescent athlete, trying to learn how to fit in. I knew I could compete. I could run fast. I could jump and stuff. But when you're a foot shorter than everybody else and 50 pounds lighter, contact sports are not your jam, right? And so I eventually found rowing. And part of what initially drew me to it was non-contact. It was about you and what you can produce on the rowing machine and then what you're responsible for in the boat and how you can work together with everybody else to make the boat go. And you win or you lose together, right? It's not like you can have an MVP on a losing team who scores 50 points, but you still lose the game, right? Literally everyone gets the same position. And so obviously I didn't have that thought process when I was a sophomore in high school learning how to row on Lake Sammamish, but that was certainly in retrospect a big part of my success and what I loved about the sport initially and what drew me into it.
Speak to your dedication to that. To become an Olympic athlete. Maybe you could even speak to like the hours and commitment level of practice and dedication, right? That it sounds like you started at a very young age.
6 days a week, almost all year. It's a year-round sport because there's a fall season and a spring season. The fall season, you do longer distance races. So you do what's called a head race, which is essentially a time trial for somewhere between 5 and 10 kilometers on a river or around buoys. And then the spring season is all the sprint racing. That's 2,000 meters. And it's basically a 2,000 meter course, like a swimming pool with lanes. And everyone starts at the same time. First one to the finish line is winner. So it's like a swimming pool in that way. And rowing is a cardiovascularly intense sport. Your VO2 max is critical. And the way the human body's physiology works is you just have to put in hours to increase your VO2 max. Essentially, it's your ability to process and use oxygen and perform by using that oxygen. Turns out that I have really large lungs, which made me good at this sport. I think I was in the top 5% of the United States team when they tested us or something like that for lung capacity as well. But going back to your original thing, like the way you train that is just by volume, 20, 30K a day. Once I got into the national team, 3-4 hours a day during practice, because you just have to put in hours and distance. And it's like anyone who wants to train for a marathon, you have to run certain amounts of time. And your body's physiology in rowing improves beyond college. And so really most will max out their potential around 27 years old, plus or minus. And obviously when you're out of college, you can train more and more and more. And so it was always just a part of my life. And it was part of my daily routine, wake up and eat and go train and sleep and train and so forth and so on for quite a long time, for, like I said, 12 and a half years.
What helped you to stay so committed? And I feel like even as an entrepreneur, especially many of us who, or maybe the listeners are in the process of getting a business started. And I want to connect this in a minute, like how this has helped you become an entrepreneur in your business and success. However, like even at a young age, not many are committed at that level to anything, right? But you were. Just all the training. It's just incredible to me that, hey, even at a young age that you're that laser focused on becoming that good.
To be clear, I was not laser focused on the Olympics at 14, 15, and 16 and so forth. When I started, I was the new guy. I was the rookie. Well, we call them novices in high school. And I was in the 3rd varsity boat. And then I was just good enough that when someone got sick, I got moved up to the JV my first year. And then my goal was like, okay, get into the JV. And then my goal was get into the varsity. And then my goal was get recruited. And where I'm going with this is I was always going to just whatever was the next thing that was just ahead of where I was and was hopefully attainable, but just it pushed me, I've heard books and people say 4% beyond your capacity is the number, right? Something like that, whatever the number is, that was kind of my trajectory. I'd never, until I was about a junior in college, I didn't think the Olympics were anything I cared about. But then I competed at my college team, which has a number of international athletes and people who had already been to the Olympics for their various countries. And I was competing and beating many of them. And then I was like, oh, I might be able to do this. And that's when the Olympic push actually started. It was over halfway through.
One thing that really stood out to me there is that you had a vision for the next thing. You achieved it. Well, okay, the next thing. And you probably had some of those things in mind, right? They were like stair steps almost for you, right? They weren't always this brand new thing, but there was something in mind. You had a vision of where you were going next. So I want to connect it now, to your entrepreneurship, your success as an entrepreneur. Lead us through that a little bit. Okay, you make it to the Olympics, and now as an athlete, maybe that career's over with. Well, I'm not really sure what happens at that point to an Olympic athlete, but how did you decide what you're going to do next and what happened?
Real estate was always in my family. My dad's a real estate attorney. Two of my uncles are big developers in Seattle. One of my other uncles owns 2 or 3 big apartment buildings in Philadelphia and is an architect. So I've always sort of had this in the periphery. And so I always knew real estate was going to be a vehicle in my life somewhere, somehow. So to paint the picture, August 2016 is the Rio Games. We were a first week sport. That means our finals were done halfway through. And then the second week was party. Only problem is we didn't do as well as we wanted. We got 4th. And that was a real crushing blow to my psyche, frankly. And I wasn't in a good place mentally. So I wasn't having a lot of fun and I was feeling really bad for myself. Come home, continued that pity party for a while, but knew that I needed to do something. And so I got into real estate on the residential side through a friend who had supported me when I was training, who was a real estate agent who was also flipping houses in Southern California. And he's like, I think I have a job for you. I think I have an opportunity. Come down here for 2 days. Let's talk about it. Long story short, that allowed me to open up a quote unquote office of his division in the Bay Area using his systems, using his knowledge, but I was in a different market all of a sudden. And I learned a lot really quickly. Ultimately, that's kind of where I got into this whole concept of real estate, flipping houses, buying rentals, selling, representing, and then all the ancillary stuff that surrounds that world.
That's incredible. It just the transition that had to happen. No doubt that would have been a major letdown, right? But obviously you did overcome that as well, right? And tell me a little bit about how just the perseverance that you had to have, the commitment level that you had as an Olympic athlete has helped you now, become the entrepreneur that you are.
Coming off the Olympics, I went to therapy for a while. I got a life coach. It was frankly like an 18-month process to really get my head back into the space of like, I can be good at something again. Cause I was so peaked out. Like I was so close to the top of a mountain that so few people can get to, which is the Olympics in this case. And then you got to come back down and be new again. And that was my experience in real estate. And that sucked, frankly. And it was really hard, especially because you didn't achieve the goal in the Olympics. And now you're starting this new thing, knowing that that's still hanging over your head a little bit. And ultimately, I realized I couldn't let this one 5.5 minute race define 12.5 years of work and friendships and, performance and so forth. And so to take that into the business world, it took 1.5 years, 2 years to really start to get my feet under me, to realize like, hey, this is another mountain I can climb, and it's a bigger mountain and it's totally different. And it opens up these doors that are like, in rowing in particular, it's a repetitive sport. You get really good at one motion, which is the rowing stroke, right? But you go climb the real estate mountain, and there's so many avenues in real estate. Like your listeners know, you can invest, you can be an agent, you can flip, you can, wholesale, you can be on title or lending. And like, there's all these things around it. And there's all these different ways to be successful in that space. And I realized there's a lot of life to live and a lot of big, cool stuff out there. And so what I know is how to be coachable, how to work hard, how to delay gratification. And if I can just take some of those aspects that I was really good at in rowing, put them into real estate, probably going to go climb that mountain pretty quickly.
Love that. I love that you highlighted too that obviously this, you were an Olympic athlete and you came off that and you hired coaches, right? You had somebody mentoring you or guiding you, right? And I interviewed JM, a guy a few minutes ago who coaches entrepreneurs all the time. We were talking about coaching and we talked about it a lot on the show. And I can't stress enough, the importance of hiring a coach. But oftentimes the first time you do it, it's like, man, should I really spend this money? Is it really worth it? But I think even your example of maybe you call it a failure. I don't know. I don't think it was a failure. I mean, being even fourth place, it's such an achievement to make it there and to do what you did. But I think too, many of the listeners can probably relate to maybe they have a business that didn't go the way they wanted, right? Or they didn't reach that top of that mountain, like you said, or maybe even a W-2 position that, man, they just didn't make it. And now they're just like, I don't even know if I can do the real estate thing now. I don't even know if that's, I just can't, I don't know. And so what would be your advice really to them now that are saying that maybe they've had that so-called failure, and they didn't hit it over here in the JOB or the business that they started. And now it's just like, I don't even know if I can do the real estate thing now. I'm just not motivated to even try something new.
Yeah. I mean, failure's only failure if you don't keep going. In college, I was in the University of Washington, and anyone who knows rowing, that is the winningest program in the last several decades at this point. My senior year was the first of 5 consecutive national championships that we won. And I won 2. I won in my sophomore and my senior year. And so we had 6 out of 7, basically. And I was part of that early team that really went there. But we also lost 2. We were second in 2 of them. And that felt like an utter failure. We could have curled up into a ball and got all sad and not come back the next year. But instead we realized no, this is a goal that we want and we all are here. It's worthy of our effort and our time. And it's something we desire. And we just recommitted to it and went back into it. So I think to answer your question, number one, it has to be something that is worth it to you. We can all fail at stuff if we don't care about it. You got to ask yourself, are you sort of self-sabotaging yourself because you're scared of actually succeeding it? Or is it something you actually don't want? Because if you don't want it, go put your effort somewhere else. But if you're failing and you're using that as a crutch or an excuse to not keep going, you're giving yourself a cop-out and you're giving yourself a reason to pull back into, it failed 10 years ago. That's a terrible idea. I'm never going to do that again, right? Or you could take the knowledge from the failure. Why did we lose? Why did the job not work out? Why did the investment lose money, etc.? And then get smarter. Because again, it's only a failure if you let it be that way in perpetuity.
Yeah, and times are tough if you're not committed to it or you're going to quit, right?
Hey guys, it's Whitney. I wanted to take some time to introduce you to my good friends over at PassiveInvesting.com. They're a national private equity real estate firm based out of the Carolinas. They focus on acquiring institutional quality apartments and self-storage facilities. They do this with private accredited investor funds. They have a portfolio of over $700 million in assets and control over $250 million in equity from their investors. PassiveInvesting.com makes it easy for you to start investing in real estate without all the hassles. They even have an average 62% repeat investor rate in each offering they put together. They even have a real estate debt fund that offers hard money loans to local fix and flippers across the U.S., which currently has a 0% default rate. To help you learn more, they've put together a free passive investor guide that outlines the 7 red flags for passive apartment and self-storage investing. Visit PassiveInvesting.com/red flags to download the PDF now. That's PassiveInvesting.com/red flags.
So I want to move forward a little bit. And now you are focused on a luxury homes, right? Luxury living. And you're working with lots of high net worth individuals. And so I just thought it's an interesting connection because, in our business, obviously that's a major part of our business, right? Is talking and speaking to high net worth individuals, presenting ourselves in a manner that, hey, we build a relationship, right? Build a relationship and they want to partner with us. They trust us, those things. I'd love to hear that from your perspective. And maybe you can speak to your business model a little bit so the listeners understand. But then how you've done that, how you've built those relationships with high net worth individuals, how you've learned that skill set, and then maybe tips on how you're finding new ones as well.
A lot of my business now comes between referrals and open houses. I am fortunate to be part of a team that sells more houses and more high-end houses than anybody in our county, frankly. And so I get the opportunity to host a lot of really high-end open houses. When I first joined this team, the principals had this concept of lean in, lean out, especially pertaining to open houses, physically, body language. You're up someone's face. It's like you want something from them, right? If you can picture that. Versus if you're kind of leaning back physically a little bit, you're separating a little space and you're like, I don't need this. I kind of want it, but I don't need it. It's a totally different engagement. And so I've applied that to those relationships and say, like, I don't need your transaction, even though I did at the time. I was like, if you want to blow this deal up, you don't want to write on, this is a stupid house, don't do it. This is 5 reasons why you shouldn't buy this house. And then they'd want to buy the house. Or I don't need your business. I am part of a very good team. I have a big book of business. I want you to get the best house you possibly can. And if now's not the right time and you need to come back in 3 years, that's cool. We'll be here. When you have this, I have a neighbor who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He owns a publicly traded company that he took public, and he's still the owner, which is really rare, especially in the industry that he's in. And his thing is always, he puts his defenses up when he thinks people want something from him, because basically everybody does. He wants to be treated like a normal person. He just wants to bro around and have a good time and invite people over to his pool, and we're just having a drink and shooting the shit. If you can bring that to those engagements, I think you will stand out with those higher net worth people, especially when you're going to raise capital. I don't need it. I want it. And here's why I want it. And here's why I think you should want to give it to me. It's just a different thing with that type of person, in my opinion.
It's a mindset shift, how you're relating to this individual and not having the want in mind, when you're beginning the relationship. I think it's a great example of your neighbor as well. And obviously, I guess he's expressed to you, right? I mean, he's shared that with you, that everybody wants something from me, but it's a massive just turn off completely, right? Are any tips around how you've done that well, maybe with new relationships, or how you've built the relationship? But I think too, it's sometimes it's hard not to come off like you're wanting something, right? Any tips around that, or anything that's worked for you? How you've, I guess, taken it slow, or built a quality relationship?
Well, as an agent and as sort of a quote unquote luxury agent, I like Ryan Serhant. I follow him. I watch him. I follow his podcast, his YouTube channel, and he's always really polished, really well dressed, really intelligent, but he brings this fun factor to what he does. And I try to bring the same thing when I'm showing a house. Like, I want someone to go into a house with me, and it's like we're just shopping with a friend and who knows a lot about what's the value of this house or the utility of this house to them. And it's fun, and that engagement, I think there's so many people who want things from other people, but also are very rigid in business and put on a tie and the whole thing. And there's a time and a place for that. But especially in this kind of thing, they're buying a personal residence. They want to raise their family there, and they want to have a good time doing, good feelings about all of it, right? And so I feel like if I can bring that fun factor and that authenticity, I emote more. I use my hands when I talk. I raise my voice, lower my voice. I literally like step into this character of myself, and it's just a little more fun. And whether or not they're responding, I'm just doing it anyways. And it always works. Everyone has a better time. They're always, feeling better at the end when you go first and you get bigger, uncross their arms, and now they're like in the space all of a sudden. And so I think the same is true with investment, because ROI, numbers, spreadsheets, it's all boring. But like when you add some emotion and some spice to it, if you will, people start to react to it differently.
Love that. And what was the guy's name? Ryan Serhant? Serhant.
Yeah, he's the number one broker in the country, I think. Anyways, he's in New York City and in many other markets now, and he sells a lot of high-end houses.
Nice. It's incredible too that you follow somebody like that you're learning a lot from, just constantly education, right? But I love how you're paying attention to your client. You're paying attention to their body language. Like I can hear you talk about, they uncross their arms, and it kind of helps open them up when you take the lead, in that. I wanted to focus on something else, and we'll change gears a little bit on you, because there's something that your team listed, and listeners probably know this, maybe you don't, but oftentimes guests will send, say, suggested topics, that we talk about. And one that was on there that I wanted to ask you about, because I don't see it ever, really. I talk about it often when I'm interviewed on shows. But one of the things you listed was building a loving, lasting marriage.
Yeah, I thought you were going there.
And so I want to hear why that's on there. I want to hear more about that because that's so important to me. I hope it's so important to the listeners because, man, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you need this right. Right. So share with us, what does that mean?
I've been married for 2.5 years now, almost 2.5 years, and we've been dating for over 8. So the relationship is not new, but it is not seasoned per se. I saw my parents get divorced and what that did to them, both physically, emotionally, and financially. And I've seen her family, go through some ups and downs as well. And then obviously friends and acquaintances and, you hear about stuff, right? Divorce is probably one of the biggest, wealth drainers you could possibly engage in as a human being. Just look at the numbers. You cut everything in half, literally.
Just life draining too, isn't it?
Financially draining. I saw my dad go through this. He's not a big guy, but he lost 15 or 20 pounds. His face got all sunken in. It was just like, oh my gosh, you've aged 15 years in 2 months. And then I've also had this, I guess they're mentors at this point. They're a couple, older couple who are very successful financially and are just good friends of ours at this point. And they tell their girls, who you marry is the biggest, most important decision you will ever make because it impacts so much stuff. And so when I put that on there, to me, if your home life isn't right, or if there's this thing that's not you could have $1 million in the bank, you could have all these investments, all this passive income. But if you come home at the end of the day and you don't enjoy the person who's there and they don't enjoy you and you guys are kind of going through motions because there's kids or there's obligation or you want to save face or whatever, that sucks. I don't care how much money you have. That sucks. And to me, it's not worth having extra money if I can't enjoy it with her in this case. And so we take that pretty seriously. We interviewed 5 or 6 couples before we decided to get married as to how people whose relationships we respected, how did they do it? Literally, we interviewed them and tried to figure out what they did well and what they would do differently. And it was just this commitment, hey, if we're going to go on this life journey together, we're going to have, because we're aligned on our investing. She just joined me in real estate. She's licensed now. So we're teaming up in that way. We own investments together. We have whatever. We have all these goals. And if we are going to go on that journey together financially, we also need to go on this relationship thing together too.
I love that. I just love that. I love that it was on there, that it's a focus of yours and your wife's. I think it's so crucial. I could not have started a business or became an entrepreneur if I didn't have the support, of my bride. And I would go flip burgers at McDonald's the rest of my life if it meant our marriage, right? The financial success is not worth losing your spouse or your children or whatever. It's just, anyway. So I just appreciated that being on there. But I wanted to ask you, I thought it was so wise too, of you all speaking to other couples that you respected, right? Their experience. They've been through the ups and downs and walked the walk, right? But I want to ask you, what are a couple of things you took away from that?
Therapy is totally okay. Call it whatever the hell you want, but therapy is fine individually and together. We've done both. And being okay that you're separate people, but you're also, there's 3 people in the relationship. There's her, there's me, and there's us. We each come with our own set of bugaboos and life experiences and preferences in every avenue, right? What kind of food we eat, when we go to bed, just the simple stuff, all the way down to how we move our money around and so forth. And she's very risk averse. I'm less so. So we have to find that medium and giving each other space to being individuals, but also being together. Not easy, obviously, but certainly important. I have movies that she doesn't watch movies. She doesn't like the movies I watch. Right. And that she doesn't like movies, period. But she's that's part of you. That's cool. You go do that. I'm going to go do a puzzle. That's her thing. And so leaving that space for each other to be individuals, but also have that cohesion together, I think is one of the biggest things that I thought came out of some of those interviews and conversations.
What about operating a business while ensuring that you're spending time on your marriage, right? Yeah, you're spending time with your bride, but man, operating a business, especially getting one started, is very time consuming, right? And I can imagine even someone at your just pursuing to operate at an elite level, like you're used to that, right? And that commitment level in business, and even myself, it was like, man, I was willing to do 80, 100 hours a week if that's what it took. I was just like, okay, whatever it takes, right? But I had to step back sometimes and think, okay, man, the family's really sacrificing here, right? And so how do you do that? How do you structure, or any tips around structuring your time, just ensuring that you're present, right? How did any thoughts around that?
Well, the good news is I married an Olympic athlete as well, so that helps. But that's why it's important who you marry, because I had some criteria, like we got to work out, she's got to eat sushi. She didn't at the time, but she tried it, and now she loves it. But it's important who you marry, and if they're on the same wavelength. If you've got someone who's very entrepreneurial, doing 80 to 100 hours a week, and you've got someone who wants to punch the clock in a W-2, get the benefits, and just be done at 5 o'clock. Like, that is not going to work very effectively. There's going to be give and take somewhere. And so I think that decision's really critical, but also you just have to protect your time at a certain point. You have to calendar things, even though it feels like our marriage shouldn't be a business. And we've said that, I'm sure everyone else has said that, but you have to, like, at a certain point, if you're growing something, you have to just protect some space on the calendar. So Wednesday, 4:30, we have a 30-minute dog walk. So we take our dog and we go walk her around the neighborhood. Sometimes we'll run her up and down the street on the bikes. And then at 5 o'clock is date night. And then the whole rest of the night is protected for whatever we want to do. And I even tell new clients when I bring them in, I've said, unless we're negotiating an offer or something super emergency comes up, don't expect to hear from me on Wednesday night. And I'm pretty good at that. Sometimes stuff happens, but I'm pretty good at it, setting that expectation. So protecting it. And then lately, we've started taking that a step further and like actually making plans like multiple weeks ahead. And instead of just saying, oh, we got to 5 o'clock, now what do we do? Oh, let's just do the normal thing that we always do, because that's the easy thing. We've actually started making dinner reservations places, new restaurants we've never been. And that's just kind of a thing we like to do now. And so it's on the calendar. It's something to look forward to, and it's blocked. And so we protect that time. And now we don't have to answer the phone. The dog is taken care of. We're out for a couple hours. We're having a new experience at this restaurant that we've never tried, but has good Yelp reviews or whatever. And that's what we're doing.
Just shows your care for one another, right? You're taking the time to plan. You're taking the time to block your calendar, even let your clients know that, hey, I'm not available, right? You're not checking your phone the whole time you're sitting at a date together.
And what's shocking is when I tell people that, 100% of them respect it. And I've had even people reach out and be like, oh, shoot, it's your date night. I'm so sorry. Like, they're apologizing to me, and they're my client, right? People really respect that.
I just appreciate you putting that on there. I think it should be talked about more. When I share about my entrepreneurial journey and the difficulty of getting started, business going, and man, I mean, it's not easy, right?
I wouldn't have been able to do this without her. She retired from her rowing career earlier than me, started her job and started her career earlier than me. And so she was financially supporting us for a while until I got going in real estate, and now gave me the space and the opportunity to build what I have. And now I slingshotted past where she was, and now she has the opportunity to take a step back, change her business. She's joining real estate and doing some other things. And so we're doing that for one another. But yeah, there's no such thing as self-made, in my opinion. Everyone has someone who's helping them.
No such thing as self-made. I could not agree more. What about, just a couple minutes left, unfortunately, but what about some daily habits that you have now that you're disciplined about that have helped you achieve this level of success?
Frankly, right now, my habits and my rituals, if you will, are sort of in flux. I'm really... I've done the miracle morning. I've done, reading 10 pages and water and workouts, so forth and so on. I'm really, through GoBundance this year in particular, I'm really focused on a couple of key things, one of which is working out 5 days a week. Whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, I try and do it in the morning, but just because time. Drinking a lot of water, fasting, doing some intermittent fasting. I'm playing around with that to see how I like it. And then continuing to read books in the evening instead of just Netflix. Like, I'll do like an episode of something and then I'll pop open the Kindle and read a little bit before bed too. I've had tons of different habits, tons of different wake up times, tons of different like things I was eating and drinking and so forth and so on. And those are great. But I've gotten to a place where I'm now re-exploring some of that stuff for myself. So honestly, it's coming back to exercise and diet, frankly, in a nutshell for me right now.
No, those things are so important. And I can even go back and say, my wife and I changed our exercising, dieting routine, all those things. And it was, we noticed some massive changes, just even the way we could think. We were just more clear-minded, there were many things that happened that were unexpected, and that was even at the beginning of our business. And that was so helpful, so thankful, even some intermittent fasting that we've done as well. But I want to ask you, before we have to go, how do you like to give back?
That is one of the GoBundance has 6 pillars, and that is one of them. And that is an area that I'm working on figuring out how that's going to plug into my life. Because frankly, it's been pretty minimal, if non-existent. Because when you're building, you think you got to save it all and you got to be selfish, and you do to some degree. But I have got a couple of ways that I'm starting to give back now. One is I've got 2 guys on my real estate team who were less than a year into their careers, and I'm their direct report, if you will. So I'm mentoring them. I'm spending a couple hours a week with each of them on transactions, on investing strategies, on building your business, on just get your head out of your butt and let's go stuff, So that's one. And then secondly, I'm working on trying to find a time with one of the local rowing clubs when I can go be a volunteer coach, like once every other week or once every week, to run a day of their training and give them feedback and give them some of the knowledge that I've accumulated and kind of. There's a couple of rowing clubs. There's one that's really well funded and has a ton of kids, and then there's like this scrappy little one, and I'm giving back to the scrappy little one at the moment.
That's incredible. I'm sure they are thankful for you and your expertise. Hans, it's been a pleasure to meet you and just learn about your journey as an athlete and the level of dedication it takes to achieve that, right? To make it to the Olympics, but then also to become a successful entrepreneur. I love the focus on your marriage, and unfortunately, many entrepreneurs sacrifice their marriage and those key relationships, right, to have success in business. And I would say they're losing much more than what they'll ever gain, in their business. And unfortunately, many here, have shared that that's what's happened to them, right? And I hate to hear that, but it's a real thing. And I just think as driven as we are, man, we can get so caught up in this thing over here and, man, forget what's so important. So I'm just grateful for the reminder of that, and just that's a focus of yours, and you're helping the listeners think through that as well. So thank you so much. Tell the listeners, though, how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
So I'm on pretty much every social media platform you can think of. Instagram and YouTube are where I'm most active right now. So Instagram is Chief Sna, which is Hans backwards. And if you go on my Instagram and you go into the highlight stories, I've got a story as to why that name exists. It's a good one. You should go check that out. And then YouTube, I put up a real estate related video once a week, and it's focused on my local market real estate wise. And I try and give people as much advice on how to be successful there as I possibly can. And then I've got a website, and that's all linked up and all that kind of stuff. So Instagram and YouTube are my 2 spots right now.
Hans, pleasure to meet you. Hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the #1 resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.